It's Champions Cup final week. It is Leinster versus Toulouse, and it is time for a bumper left-wing Champions Cup final preview. I'm Will Slattery. I'm delighted to be joined by Rory O'Connor and Luke Fitzgerald for our chat, and that's so much to get to. There's loads of URC stuff going on. Simon Zebo's retirement, the news Sam Prendergast might be going out on loan, but we'll start with the big game and we'll weave the other topics in throughout. There's so many storylines going into Saturday. You know, the clash of the Titans, the two most successful teams in tournament history finally meeting in a final. What's the kind of thing that's kind of catching your interest the most, or kind of giving you thoughts heading into Saturday?
Look, it's all about Leinster getting over the line for me. You know, the fact that they've lost 3 in a row, that this group of players, like a bunch of them haven't, they've won stuff for Ireland, but they haven't won anything for Leinster. The way the last 2 finals, I suppose the 3 finals have unfolded, the fact that they've got away from them in the end, the addition of Jacques Nienaber, the kind of presumption that he will add kind of a mental string to their bow as well as a defensive string, and the fact that I haven't been overly impressed by them a lot this season. You know, I was in Belfast on Saturday again, another game where they let a tight game slip and didn't score in the last 20 minutes, and a lot of the kind of foibles or the kind of the weaknesses that I've seen all season were on display. It's just, there's such a fascinating, like, there's often Leinster seasons are not that interesting because they just win all the time and they get to the final and then they lose. Whereas this year, it's been the most interesting Leinster season for years. The psychological element of it is fascinating. They're obviously a really good team with really good players, but can they do it? That's just the big question. And Toulouse, there's loads of different romantic parts of it, but the crux of it is whether Leinster have the mental capacity to get through this game and land the big one, because they've been so close, but it's been a long time since they did it.
Yeah, do you think Leinster are mentally strong enough to take the step this Saturday? Like, obviously, they've beaten Toulouse in 2 semi-finals in a row, so we know they match up with them on their day when they're playing well. But what about the baggage piece of it? Do you think that's significant in your opinion?
I think so. They look a little bit shaky to me, a little bit still, and I do wonder about the attack. The most reassuring part for me is that I think there was a few key guys back on the weekend. I thought James Ryan was very good in parts, had a few challenges. It looked like he got on the wrong side of the referee. That's happened on a number of occasions, I think. So needs to watch that. But other than that, I mean, the physicality that he brings, I think he's probably crucial that he's back and he's a real leader amongst that group. Obviously, goes without saying, he's a co-captain. So that's really important for them, I think. And I think he's a really big player for Ireland too, and Leinster. So that's a big one. I thought Keenan was outstanding on the weekend. Like, he's world class. He's so dangerous as well. Takes smart lines. I thought he was really good defensively in a pretty abject first half Leinster performance from a defensive perspective. They got opened up on a number of occasions by Ulster, which probably doesn't bode that well, even though I think the personnel will be quite different on the weekend. But that still is just, I think Toulouse will look at that and say, okay, well, it might not be as good a defensive outfit in terms of the personnel, but there's still a few things that we will learn from that, and we'll try. And I think they've got Toulouse certainly have the people to hurt you, and they'd be more difficult to tackle. They get more offloads away. They were all issues that Leinster had in the weekend. So watching that one closely as well, that area of the game. But Keenan was outstanding, and he's big for Leinster. Like, he gives them that little bit of pace I think they've been missing in the back three, in that key place at full back. He also has the ball handling ability similar to Frawley. Like, I think his hands are probably as good as Frawley's, probably slightly different in that Frawley probably has maybe a bigger range, but the key passes for a full back, Keenan has them. Sad not to see Gary Ringrose out there. I think he's like a really important player for Leinster too. But other than that, I think those 2 guys bring an awful lot to the full Leinster team, if you like. So you'd be nervous about it. I think it's going to be a tight game, but I still think there's plenty there for Leinster to go and get the job done. And I expect them to have some nerves, but I just wonder, will that have been the little bit of a wake-up call that might be just perfect for them heading into what is a massive, massive game? And I think Ireland have dealt with DuPont reasonably well. Of all the teams in the world, Ireland seem to do a pretty good job of that on a regular basis. There is a lot of players from the Irish team in this Leinster team, so I don't think he'll be as feared. My thing, I think, when I think about the weekend the most, the one, because I'm having a few conversations with my old man at home about it, and over the last week or so, I've just been hanging around, and that was the one area we said, Entomac back. Like, that is, if you look at the team, they kind of balance up pretty good. Maybe Leinster have edge in a few different areas, probably a little bit fitter than them, but Nines are very different, but both very influential. 10, like Entimac on his day, is a real game breaker. So what he did to La Rochelle last year in the Bouclier. I worry about Byrne against him. I think, particularly in the defence, it's coming up pretty hard. There'll be a few one-on-ones, I'd imagine. And he's slippery and he's very dangerous. So that's the one area in both teams where I say, there's a little bit of a difference in quality, I think. Byrne is steady head, good temperament, but just does he match up physically that well with him? I don't think he does. If he's left one-on-one late in the game with him, I worry a little bit. So it's a weird thing to say maybe at the end, but that's one thing we've come back to, when we're talking about it. And the old man it's not a guy from the bar seat at a wedding, Will.
That's what I was thinking.
He knows a bit of rugby.
It's like a podcast in itself.
You play for Ireland, unlike the guests at the wedding who I spoke to.
Your guest was right, by the way, at the wedding, but still.
Jimmy O'Brien, he called it. Ross Byrne, we were just chatting off air about his role this weekend and how crucial his performance will be. Obviously against La Rochelle, he had a man of the match performance against Northampton as the team tightened up in the second half. Again, kind of similar to the La Rochelle final last year. I think a few fingers were pointed at his ability to manage that piece of it. You'd have your concerns. I think it's fair to say if he's going to be the man to lead Leinster over the line on Saturday.
Yeah, he did media yesterday. Funny enough, he did it before the Northampton game. We're getting more Ross Byrne in the media than we've really ever had before. I know he did a great interview with you guys a couple of years ago.
Smart guy, isn't he?
He is, and he's very calm. He's not I think he realises that a few of the people in the room probably don't rate him that highly, and he's not afraid to kind of be a little bit hostile about that, and that's fine. He's kind of, there's an abrasiveness to him and a bit of he rates himself, and that's he has to. He's starting for Leinster in a Champions Cup final, but I think it's that speed thing, and I've harped on it about it a bit this season whereby Leinster at times, and I think Keenan makes a big difference, and Jimmy O'Brien, if selected, would make a big difference as well. In that, I don't think they're the quickest backline of all time. They can play fast because Gibson Park gives them great tempo, but they actually don't have a huge amount of speed, and Toulouse have incredible pace across their backline, and he even kind of joked about the intercept that he got, and it wasn't an ideal. He went and read the pass really well, but he kind of realised it wasn't an ideal situation for him to be in because he doesn't have the gas to outstrip Furbank. But I think, even just watching I watched a bit of Harlequins Toulouse earlier on, and the way Marcus Smith was able to prise open Toulouse, because he's able to. When Toulouse drifted, he was able to cut through the gap. Ross can't do that really. He doesn't have the speed to challenge. And what Toulouse will do is they'll just fan past them. They'll back themselves to be able to get him.
He went deep on this point. This is because I was always saying that's the key difference with Johnny is not he's not Marcus Smith quick, but he has enough, and he's got a step as well.
He certainly did in 2011.
But even at the latter end, he has enough to go through. He's also a big man, and he's kind of strong. So he'd worry you you couldn't just leave him. Whereas I think Ross, you could say, I think my flank.
Look at Jack Crowley on Friday night.
It's so important to have it. I think just all it does is it creates the little bit of doubt in the opposition's mind about can I leave, can I not? That has implications everywhere for the team, particularly for your centres, for anyone who's running outside you. So it's a big point you make there. And that's probably the key difference between the two. Entimac, you cannot leave that man.
Probably their second best game breaker in the backline for an out half, and it's obviously 9 and 10, which is unusual for any team to be their two best game breakers. But
probably right.
The try he scored against La Rochelle. Is there any other out half, or very few other out half?
Odin Barrett probably.
And Mwanga can.
Jalabert can probably do it. There are a few,
but they're not many.
But he has the other. I've probably underestimated Entimac over the years, and it's really when he was missing with his injury, and now seeing him after he's come back, and also that moment.
World Cup really showed it, didn't it? I think, yeah.
It's a bit like Byrne having Gibson Park beside. If you got Dupont beside you, you're just never going to shine in the same way.
Yeah.
But he has such qualities that. He is a potential match winner. Ross could win the match with his goal kicking. His cross kicking is very good. His decision making. I think he needs to step up and control Leinster as the game goes on a bit better than he has maybe in some of the matches that he's played. Some of the biggest matches. We need to see a commanding Ross Byrne performance. I know Gibson Park will make decisions, but he needs to demand the ball. And the big key thing from last season was to keep playing, because they didn't keep playing last season. I know we've talked about the fatigue. We've gone over it.
I see. I think there's a strand to that point that's really important. Is that what Johnny was really great at, and you'd never know unless you were playing with him really, but he would rinse you. Particularly the guys in the pack, when you start getting tired, if you started putting fourth or fifth body into a ruck, any break and play, he'd go berserk at you. And that's vital for Ross Byrne, because if you think about what we just said there about his, not really having much of a break in his game, that's okay if you have lots of options outside you. If you have a runner inside you, if you have runners outside you. But if everyone's in the ruck when they're getting tired, and that's exactly what happened last year against La Rochelle, after a minute 30 in the game, really, they were piling bodies in. They got tired. Looked like they hadn't played. Looked like a team that hadn't played. Another opposition team that had, in a knockout stage for a couple of weeks. At least they got that a couple of weeks ago. I think they've had that. A tough game. I would have been tempted to play a good few more of them against Ulster. If I'm being completely honest with you, I might have risked the injuries, just because I feel like having that. You think about Munster's game against Edinburgh, where they're fighting tooth and nail to the end. Like, there was bodies on the line. So look, I'm hoping they're fit enough. I think providing the options for Ross Byrne, and as you say, the key point there, he's got to command the team. He has got to rip into guys who are overcommitting to rucks, who aren't providing him with options, because for him to play well, it means Leinster play well, but for him to play well, he needs options around him, because that's what I think brings out his best traits, that calmness, that ability to pick the right decision under pressure. He can do those things well, pick the right kick. What those things need is people to be spread out in the pitch, spread out the opposition defence. That's where you get to go, okay, there's a good option, that's a good option, this is the right guy to pass to. So that's the vital thing for me this week as well. And there's a strand to it, I think, which is important to mention. Get the guys out of those rucks, really important, because they're going to be tired, they've been extra nerves, all that stuff this week. They'll all be there for this Leinster team, and he has got to get those guys off their feet and into good positions.
It's a good point you make. Just to turn it to Toulouse slightly for a second and get both your opinions on this. Like you said, your big talking point was Leinster and their emotional baggage or psychological baggage. Rather, like for Toulouse, back-to-back semi-finals, they've been beaten out the gate like 40-17 and 41-22. Like, talk about wilting or people losing energy in the second half. Like, both those games, Toulouse really faded. Against Harlequins in the second half, when Quins pushed the pace, they looked very, very unfit, or not unfit, but
the one that stood out was the big long kick, wasn't it? Do you remember that try? I think it was Tyrone Green. Tyrone Green. I'll never ever get that name. I forgot about 4 or 5 times a couple of weeks ago. That try was, that's what Leinster need to be doing. Yeah,
like I would question Toulouse's fitness, their ability to stay for 80 minutes as well, and like Leinster, I feel like people are just completely binning those two semi-finals.
I don't think so. I feel like they form a large part of. We've been talking on WhatsApp during the week. Like, I keep veering between Leinster and Toulouse for this game, and when I think about why Leinster can win it, those semi-finals are absolutely top of my mind, as well as the fact that Ireland, as Luke said, have been able to contain Dupont at times that he struggled. I was in Toulouse when they beat Munster in the pool stages last year, and they were already talking about having to go to Dublin. They were spooked by Dublin. They're spooked by Leinster in Dublin. I don't think psychologically they'll be spooked by Leinster in London. They've won a Champions Cup in London 3 years ago. They don't see it the same way. I think getting them onto neutral soil will diminish some of that baggage. They've won the tournament more recently than Leinster. They won it. They bounced back from that semi-final to go and win the Bouclier in dramatic fashion. And I don't think they're the mentality monsters that La Rochelle have been. I don't think they have that unbelievable mental steel that O'Gara put into that La Rochelle team, who nearly beat them with 14 men before they went and did what they did against Leinster 2 years in a row. But they do have the Toulouse, they have that kind of that corkness, that Toulouse-ness, that's like, no, Leinster used to have that as well. No, it's not in the tournament. No, it's not. It's better. Like, it's obviously better in Toulouse. They have a very bad record in Dublin. I think it's a massive factor. It's definitely a factor. And if Leinster get ahead and build a score and Toulouse start blowing, it'll be in their heads that it's happening again to them. In the same way that if Toulouse get on top, Leinster, they both have a bit of mental baggage. I just think Leinster's is heavier because they haven't got over the line in the URC even. I know the players have won stuff with Ireland, so it's maybe. But I don't know. They put such. It was interesting. Robin McBride was up yesterday. And he talked about how, look, this doesn't define us. It was a very different approach to last year, because last year was all, and they've talked about this, they put so much into it because it was in Dublin and the fifth star and all the stuff we talked about afterwards. Whereas now there's a bit more of it. We want to enjoy the week. I'd say Nina Arbour's bringing a lot of this stuff as well. Just that change of voice, change of emphasis. It doesn't define you, and that, I think, will lift the pressure off them a little bit. But it's there, but like there's a mental side and there's a physical side and there's a technical game plan side, and like you could call all of them. They're so close on all these fronts. It's such a hard game to call, and I've been veering wildly between the two of them all week.
The fifth star, I think, has been one of the most ruinous psychological gambits any team has ever put out. For one, Toulouse already have 5 stars, so it's not as if you're reaching Mount Everest. Like, a team has already beaten you to it. Number 2, half these players haven't won any Champions Cups. Number 3, what's the relevance of the 3 Champions Cups you won to the guys who are playing Saturday? Like, none.
Not true, because half of them were there as fans and they grew up watching it, so they don't feel like they're proper Leinster players until they've done it. So I think that weighs heavily on them.
I would say is the contrary to that. It's almost
they
as if we're all part of the same squad going for a 5th star.
They see it as adding to the Leinster legacy. I think that's where it is. Like, Ross Byrne was at the 09 and 11 finals. James Ryan was there when Leinster beat Toulouse in 2006. He was in Toulouse that day with his dad. Like, they've all grown up watching this stuff. You know, Joe McCarthy was talking about how he was at a communion, watching all the finals. Over the years, like it's part of it weighed really heavily on Munster and Peter O'Mahony's Munster when the greats of 06 and 08 retired and they weren't going to get there. They felt like they were letting the whole institution down. Like, Leinster have gotten much closer. Half of them have won it. Like, maybe not half. We have to go through the numbers, but I do think it is a factor.
Now, I'd say a little bit less than half now.
Because the turnover from 18 to now is quite significant.
Like, it's a first start. This should be like I don't get how someone like
start again.
Yeah. Like,
the only thing is though, like, should you be building on, like, there's a winning mentality that I think that probably comes with that. Like, so there's probably 2 ways you can turn with that. You could say, well, look, we've been here, we've done that. You know, there's other teams like, so La Rochelle for their first one, it's all new for them, you know, whereas it wasn't for Leinster, or it wasn't for a few of those players at least. But you can kind of lean on those, say, well, look, we're supposed to be here. So there's 2 ways you can turn with that. Clearly, it's gone the other way for Leinster, you know, and it kind of, like, in my mind, they probably have just approached a few of these things quite poorly. I think they've pretty much negated any of the end season games in the league by not playing any of their players in them for the last couple of years, and I think that's a massive mistake. I think you've heard me harp on about this the last couple of weeks, and it's kind of a realisation that I've come to. Like, I did say it last year, but probably in a slightly different context, just that giving away the league was a really bad, like, that was shocking stuff to be doing that. But I just think there's another side to it where there's a fitness element to it. There's playing against teams who are playing desperate to get into qualifications. Even if they're not in the cup, they're gone from the cup. They're playing for their lives. It could be their last game of the season. They're emptying the tanks against you in the last 15, 20 minutes. Like Ulster were doing on the weekend, and you're kind of going, that is really, really beneficial to play under that pressure, in that pressure environment. To, you know, if this Leinster team had dug out, you know, a crucial score or a big turnover after, you know, 5 minutes of defence against Ulster up in Kingspan on the weekend, imagine the confidence that it give you at the end, end of a game against Toulouse when you're trying to dig in. Probably hard to describe to someone who hasn't played at in those types of games. But I remember there's certain games that I remember from Leinster that I felt really, really helped us win our first Heineken Cup. I thought there was a weird one away in Scarlets where we were down a man, but the conditions were awful. But I remember we had to. I think we scored I actually was in scrum half for maybe about 3 or 4 minutes, and we had to score a try, but we were down to 14 men. The conditions were awful. They were a strong Scarlets team at the time, but I remember we came out of there with a real dogged win, and I remember thinking we came together as a group there, and that, like, kind of, I thought that was the year, that was in 08, and I just felt like that really held well for us for the rest of the season. It tightened up the group, made us way more difficult to beat, and carried us into some of the bigger wins that we got. That's one that sticks in my mind for the rest of my career. Completely random game, you'd never even remembered if you covered it, but some of those games that you have, I feel like Leinster have missed the opportunity to play their top guys in them, and I think they're underestimating them, at the importance of them at this time of the year. So there's a little bit of that going on, as well as the 5 stars. I think they were. You're right. They probably built it up a little bit too much, and probably missed out on what you really should be taking from it, which is that calmness, that cold, clinical, killer mindset that, like, winning teams have. That City, like Man City at the moment, you're just going. Like, they were behind, around Christmas, but you could tell all the pundits knew. Like, there were people who really knew were like, nah, like, everyone picked City to win the league, and that's how it turned out in the end. They just have that mindset of just winning mentality all the time. So I could see what they're probably trying to go for, but they went a different way with it. I think there's a few reasons for that. Well, it's not just the 5 stars, Okay. Maybe I could be wrong. I don't know. Do you think differently or no?
No. I think they're both. They're both part of it, but I think you're, like, I completely accept you. I think this last weekend they probably, like, Toulouse rested everyone,
Oh, they could have rested. Sorry, maybe this is a bad example. They at least they played them 2 weeks ago.
Yeah,
having played.
They weren't. It wasn't completely.
They knew there was.
Like they've put a lot of like last week. I bumped into one of the players on Friday, and he was just talking about how much work they done on Toulouse last week. So the starters basically spent last week largely in the video room. They trained ahead of Ulster. The performance smacked of a team that hadn't really been thinking about Ulster all week. They've been thinking about Toulouse. I think they've put 2 weeks worth of prep into this one game.
Champions Cup final. I think to take the weekend before, and I think it's a European.
I think that's fine. My point is probably more towards last season.
I take the broader point generally. Maybe opportunities lost.
I don't think we should underestimate how much the final being in Dublin in front of their friends and family was a factor last year as well. I just don't know if they've built it up as emotionally this year. It's still important, and the baggage of the last 2 years is definitely there. But I just didn't get this. I don't get the sense that they might not tighten up as much this time around because they've suffered all the heartbreak. I mean, more heartbreak, it'd be terrible. But I don't know if they can ever have their hearts broken in the same way again.
Can I say as well, the shift? I think what might really help them is you think of South Africa and you think of. So we've talked about Ninabar, but if you think about the shift towards that focus on defence, that actually is a good bit easier to deliver that kind of a big defensive performance in a final than it is to deliver the fancy stuff. Like it really is, like trying to hold your depth when you're like, dying to get your hands on the ball. Perfect passes.
They win
under
without
pressure.
the fancy stuff though.
No, they'll need a little bit of a will. No, but they don't need to deliver an 80-minute.
Even if Ninaber's defence is really good, if Leinster don't deliver. I suppose they won a Champions Cup.
But you can build pressure that way.
Only winning 18-12, I suppose they've or 15-12.
Yeah.
So if you think about, what's I think is a good example of this, a really good example in the club game is probably those Saracens games against Leinster. Do you remember they just kind of squeezed Leinster out with some brilliant performances, and they ended up kind of building a lead through kicking, and then the kind of game opened up. They took their chances. To my mind, there's something in that for Leinster. There's a bit more of a focus on what is the focus in defence? Like it's being physical, it's being G'd up for it, which it's a final. You're going to have all those things. I think it's probably just to slightly not overdo it, be offside, give away penalties, etc. But delivering on being physical, being up for it, being tuned in, it's way easier to do in defence. You don't have that to deliver on the attacking plays. You have to have that little bit of calmness. That's really, really hard to do, particularly first 15, 20 minutes of these games. They can just fly by like that, and you don't know what's happened. And the other team, remember, they're going to be G'd up for it. They're going to be, coming into you at rucks, going to be maybe slightly slower ball. They're going to be coming off the line trying to melt you. So I just think there's something in that maybe we haven't really given a massive amount of thought to. We've been thinking about it from a different direction, going, will Ninabar's mindset help? But actually, will the tilt towards being a bit more defensively sound, could that help them too? Because it's easier to deliver. Just a thought.
They also get energy from messing up opposition rucks, and they're really, really good at it. And that's something again that you don't. That's attitude. That's aggressiveness and all sort of stuff. The other mental factor that's not there this year is there's no Ronan O'Gara, and I think he had got himself into they made a plan as of what they were going to do at half time to block him getting into the dressing room. I think he was in their head, and you could see what it meant to them to get him off their back in a couple of weeks ago. So. While Toulouse are Toulouse and a great, the greatest European club in history, I just don't think Leinster think of them in the same way. They don't see them as their bête noire in the way that O'Gara is seen. But the attacking, to go back to the tactical stuff, can Leinster's attack get enough points on the board? Byrne says he's fixed whatever went wrong with his kicking against Northampton, and you trust that he's a quality kicker. He left points behind in the final last year. They didn't get enough on the board for their early dominance. I think if he'd managed those kicks, he just might have given 17 points was doable. If it was 21, it might have been a different matter. But Toulouse give you opportunities, but Leinster's attack, apart from the La Rochelle game this season, really that's an outlier. I don't think they've been as accurate, as incisive. I think Osborne brings some lovely stuff to the table, but it's 2-12s playing in the midfield. There's a call as to whether you go with Larmour or O'Brien. My instinct is they'll go with Larmour. I think Keenan gives you something really great in attack and defence, and the pass the other day and the attitude that he brings. He brings something unexpected to the party. But as a unit, the focus on defence, I think, has taken away from some of what Leinster can do in attack. And I think we know that Toulouse can score and can score heavily. And Leinster are almost relying on the Ninaber defence shutting down the Toulouse defence. But France managed 3 tries against South Africa in a World Cup quarter final, and that was an Ninaber team that had been building for 4 years for this one specific game. And they still, they managed to get over the line. They got enough points themselves. But you just wonder whether the Leinster attack can deliver the goods on Saturday. And I've never really had a question mark over the Leinster attack going into a final.
It comes down to their forwards, I think.
It's huge.
Yeah.
I know people said Stuart Lancaster was time for a change, etc., but as we've all said, we've seen Leinster this year, especially in the Champions Cup when they've rolled out their strongest team pretty much in all whatever 6-7 games it's been. They haven't been as attacking focused or as clinical. We've made it a point of the held up tries around the line, maybe that lacking a bit of a clinical edge around the line. Like, that's definitely been a factor. I don't think that means that necessarily, because like the La Rochelle game, I know it's an outlier, but it's still the biggest test they've had, and they were very, very good that day, and
they left a lot of points behind the first half.
They did.
Made it to weather, and like then there's been
butchered two.
And Toulouse are in far better form than La Rochelle were.
Yeah,
La Rochelle had no form line. They were relying completely on the last 2 years, whereas Toulouse have a form line and their attack is very good. So.
And they will be fresh. That's big. You know, they have caught, like that one against Munster was they have a great squad in that, but that was a big one to recover from, you know, and to come out at that pace away from home again, that was always going to be a massive ask for Toulouse, I think, to take Leinster out there. I think in the manner of it was pretty disheartening for them, but I think they knew that one was over. I would say you've got something there in terms of that recurring theme with Leinster, is like giving teams opportunity, like even against Ulster on the weekend, you know, like when they got themselves ahead, they just let them back in, you know, silly errors, you know, kind of a little bit sloppy around ruck, silly penalties they gave away, you know, just things like that. And I think that's something that's been going on all season. So that I don't think, because Ramos will kick everything. And I think he's going to start. I don't think they'll play Kinghorn again at fullback. I just don't think.
Might put him on the wing.
Yeah.
Might put him on the wing, but Ramos has to start in the final. You've got to have a guy who's going to kick 90%. And look, Ross Byrne his day can do that. He did leave two tough ones in fairness, but there was one he definitely should have got in the final last year that would probably haunt him a little bit. The other ones, you'd hope 1 out of 2, and it would have been a result probably, but he didn't get either, and one of them hit the post.
Even
in fairness,
the semi did, the one he missed in the semi from right in front. That makes it too far away from Northampton to change.
I'd back him to get it right though. I like his mindset. You know?
But if he's in the team, for his kicking, so he's got to kick. Because if he doesn't, I think the question marks will crush him. Because like it's a big day for him. It's a big day for his career.
I wonder about not playing Frawley on the weekend. What did you think of that? I thought that was a big risk. But like I thought Frawley at 10 would have been a no-brainer, if I'm being completely honest. Particularly if he's going to be on your bench.
Yeah, well, I mean,
he's got no game time at 10.
Leo Cullen does not like to pick him in an out half. Like, so it doesn't surprise me. I don't think it's a no-brainer at all. Just knowing how Leo Cullen selects his teams, like it was the least surprising selection.
But if he has to go in, so if you're thinking about the game of the weekend and you're Toulouse, and you're thinking about whose channel you're going to run down, like who's like aside from him being the decision maker, you want to tire him out. He's also the weakest defender on the team. So like, why would you not have a really viable option and just on the bench just in case there's an issue? Because I think that's a huge risk. Like when I saw that, I was like when I saw him pick Harry Byrne, like maybe Harry Byrne is going to be the guy who's going to be on the bench. Maybe that's what it is. I could be wrong on that.
In a 5-3,
could be. In my mind then it was insane not to play Frawley at 10. Not even to give him 50 minutes.
Yeah, I just don't think Harry didn't. Even if they were thinking about it, I think.
Well, he didn't do himself any favours.
Like I don't think Lucan Grad did himself any. I think Cormac Foley probably played himself onto the bench with his performance and his ability to play on the wing. He did pretty good job there. So like it wasn't a particularly good day for Harry Byrne.
I don't think that's a big risk. Not if you're not like even to not have Frawley on the bench to go take 30 minutes, like just something at the end of the game.
It's a fair point.
The feel of it, like something like because then he's going in a Champions Cup final, not having played there in like weeks. Do you know what I mean? Like not having had a proper go at it with the team all week, just even running the plays. Like he's got to be a smart enough guy that he could have picked up or he could have been in those meetings and say, listen, you're doing 2 sets of meetings this week. You know what I mean? Like because they clearly didn't put that much emphasis on the game. I don't think against Ulster. So I just thought that was a real risk. And that's an area where I'm worried about for that reason too.
And
you know,
in terms of selection generally, like the back row, there's a kind of a Will Connors. Does he come back in after playing the 2 La Rochelle games? Where do you weigh in on that?
I'd go 6-2. I'd start Will Connors and keep Josh van der Fleer on the bench alongside Conan with the idea, and probably Jenkins, with the idea of bringing Kelleher, Jenkins, Conan and van der Fleer all on at once at about 45 minutes. Yeah. Empty yourself, then unleash the second wave. That means the problem they almost have too many options. It's such a I can't see even though they're saying Ringrose could play, I just can't see them playing Ringrose with 20 minutes of action in 4 or 5 months. I don't think that's a good call. So you start
a fit guy though.
He is, and he's your co-captain, but you're bringing in a guy like you can't go 6-2 if you start Ringrose. You got to put Jimmy O'Brien on the bench because you know he might not get through it. You know, and it's a shoulder. You know, he's also marking maybe Toulouse's third most dangerous player, and Cost, who's unbelievable. Like Cost has ripped apart every defence I've seen him play against. So there's Jimmy O'Brien versus Jordan Larmour is a call. Do you put Jimmy O'Brien into the 23 jersey? Could you maybe pick him out of Frawley? They picked him at 13 at the weekend. I don't think you can go in without a proper specific cover for Ross Byrne. But I would go with Connors, because I think he suits the profile of player Toulouse have. I think he can kind of Mark Miafu in the way that he did Skelton, even though they are slightly different players. But his offloading game, it gives them life, and then unleash what they have. And then behind the scrum, I would start O'Brien personally. It might be very harsh on Jordan Larmour, who's been very, very good all season. But Nienaber's ruthless. He dropped his 9 and 10 for the World Cup final and took his 10 off after 30 minutes of a World Cup semi-final.
So he blew the selection initially.
But I know, but he doesn't. He's not afraid to leave someone out. So I think Jimmy O'Brien gives you more. I was so impressed with him since he came back. And
just on the Will Connors one, I'd be interested to see if he starts, because for me, it would be a defensive selection, literally and figuratively, in that they'd be really they'd be putting Toulouse on a pedestal with La Rochelle. They'd almost be elevating Toulouse to that specific, as you say, kind of body type. I don't see them as being the same. I think Van der Fleer,
really similar.
In the 2 semi-finals they've won, Van der Fleer has been really good. I think Leinster need to sow into Toulouse, and they've blown them away in those games. I think if you pick Will Connors, you're kind of saying, we expect this to be kind of having to absorb loads of pressure, and we need Will Connors to be chopping them down because we're going to be on the back foot. Whereas I think Leinster should be on
There's
the
more
offense.
to Will Connors than his tackling, though. He even on the weekend, he
that was a lovely that. I know it was a block down, but the catch was good and the pass was good. He's a smart player.
But I think Will Connors, for instance, would have been very valuable, say, off the bench against Northampton when they started getting. There's an idea that you have to start Will Connors, or else the impact isn't the same. I think having a great defender to coming on in the last 20
gets you a few pens,
massive valuable as well.
Turnovers,
So I would swap that around personally. That'd be the only change I'd make to what Rudd said, because I do think everyone thinks Will Connors will come in. Miafu is not Will Skelton. He's a good ball carrier, but Skelton is far more impactful, in my opinion, than Miafu. I feel like I just don't think Toulouse's ball carriers in the pack are so good that it justifies taking Van der Fleer out of the team when he offers you so much more, in my opinion, around the pitch than Will Connors. Will Connors is a better defender, arguably, but I
think, as well, there's probably something to that, Will, in that you say, who's a better player? And I'd say, to my mind, Van der Fleer edges that. He does. I really rate. I rate Connors very, very highly. But I think you're right, and I think that's kind of a key thing. Who are you going to give 50 minutes to? You give it to your better player, I think. I think you're probably right. Because you've got Antonio, you've just got a few.
Antonio, Bahia, Aldrin, and Skelton. I think they're 4 better ball carriers, arguably, than Toulouse have in their pack. That's how far I would go. That's a big statement. Mavak is very rangy and athletic.
Very powerful.
Those four guys are big.
They're different.
They're different.
They are a different team, and
that's my point, basically.
Your point is it's well argued, and it's kind of toss of a coin stuff. My reasoning for going with Josh is the idea of finishing with your best team, or finishing with a team that's almost on par on the bench. Yeah, so you're bringing on Josh and Conan. I
thought I have him for the majority of the game. Maybe I think. That's a point of view. They'll finish.
And the way they've used their bench still isn't good enough for me to be certain they would use it the way I would ideally like if this is the selection they're going with. Sometimes they brought subs on at different times. The finals, infamously, they haven't used their bench well. I know going back to 2022, I think Kieran Frawley didn't get on in either final. The last 2 years, he didn't even play a minute. I think John McCarthy got 2 minutes in Marseille. Yeah. Why is he even there if he's going to get 2 minutes? There's been some selections that I don't think they haven't really used the guys well. Now, it does appear that they've changed their tack. Against Northampton, they brought them on quite early, and Jack Conan was excellent. A couple of other guys.
Jenkins was good.
There was also an argument, though, that they're probably are they taking some guys off who are playing well just to be doing it. There's a bit of that too. I thought the Sheehan one.
Etsebet used to come off very early at the World Cup when he was still, I thought, playing unbelievable.
Yeah. So look, it's definitely interesting. The one thing I think that probably won't be an issue for them is if someone's not doing the job or it's not working out, neither will pull you. And look, regardless of all the stick I gave him during the World Cup for some of the poor selections, they changed it quick when they realised it was going wrong. So he is able to adapt. He's not afraid to make a change, and I think he might actually end up being where he's a lot of the talk, and it's nothing newer. But that might be the biggest element that I think he brings to this. The defensive focus. Maybe close, but I think the other thing is the use of the bench. He's going to be aggressive with it. He is going to use that as a weapon, not as a defensive tool, I don't think. Regardless of how we think about who he picks for the first 15 and whether that's attacking or defensive, he will be attacking with his bench. There's no doubt about that.
And to flip that around, I don't think Toulouse's bench is as strong. Richie Arnold, if he's on the bench, class player.
Marchand.
Yeah, Marchand. They're, to be right, they're two world class.
Leinster have more quality on the bench.
I think so.
I wonder could they put Capuzzo in? I know they have the Choco Barres is not suspended. The Argentinian centre is not suspended, and he came off the bench in the semi final, and he's a big player. He's in terms of physically. But if you've got Ange Capuzzo in your squad,
just a change
and you're chasing a game, like it's not a bad guy to bring in. Look, Kinghorn broke his nose against Harlequin, so he may not even feature at all. But he's back. But you wonder, like, do you go? Yeah, there's like they have big selection calls as well because their C team just beat Montpellier away on the weekend. So like they've got good depth, even though you're right, they're not. They're not rolling off France internationals left, right, and centre in the way Leinster will have Ireland internationals coming off the bench. So there is an argument that Leinster will be stronger if they use their bench properly. But
Conan's Leinster, if you like Conan, I think is on fire.
Yeah.
Like, I think he's very unlucky.
Keller
I don't think he'll get. Keller's back to playing well. I think
Cian Healy's playing well.
Keane was good in the weekend, I thought. Alalatoa, who's been, like, I would say pretty, like, I haven't been his biggest fan. He looked pretty good in the weekend. He had a few good moments. So, and Ryan, like, does Ryan start?
I think he starts.
I think he starts. Yeah, he does. Okay. Well, look. In fairness, Maloney's playing well too. So if they're struggling the line out, he gives you something there. Or do you go a different route?
I go with Jenkins over Maloney personally.
Interesting.
Because
Probably
he's playing against the French
back.
team. Yeah, I just think Ross he's undersized against these French teams, and it's maybe a little bit unfair on him. But it's why
I just assumed. Yeah.
but then Leo Cullen rates him very, very highly. They love his the way he runs the line out. Like he is smart. Maybe as a bench option it works. But like I thought it was interesting. He was on the bench. He was the one member of the 15 from the from the semi-final who was involved last weekend. So but
he was on the. I just thought being on the bench was maybe a thing. Well, maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe I'm overthinking that.
What about Cormac Foley? You mentioned him there. Like, I thought he had a really good game. Obviously, when they had the injuries, it reminded me of actually the game in Twickenham when I thought Jamieson Gibson Park should have stayed at 9 and Murray should have gone to the wing. Like, I would have put Luke McGrath on the wing. He's a good defender, and kept Cormac Foley at 9, where I thought he was far more influential. I think he's a better pass now. And he played at centre and full back in school. Like, he can cover and he was very good. He was against the schools at that level. He can play on the wing if you need it. So if you go 6-2 and have Cormac Foley and Frawley, you're covering every base, I think, pretty well. It'd be a massive call to put him in the final, but realistically, Gibson Park is going to play 79 minutes anyway. Like, Luke McGrath's not going to play much rugby unless there's an injury, so I don't see that as a huge risk personally.
Yeah, and I don't think Luke McGrath's playing particularly well at the moment. I think I was at the Ospreys game 2 weeks ago. He wasn't great that day, and I didn't think he really improved them at the weekend when he came on either. So I think Foley's playing better at the moment. Yes, it's a risk, but like they put Michael Milne on the bench for the La Rochelle game ahead of Cian Healy, which is subsequently has turned out to be a bit of a mad call because Michael Milne's scrummaging hasn't been particularly good, and Cian Healy's responded really, really well. But that was a big game to make that call. They won it, so it kind of flew under the radar a little bit. So they're not afraid to put young players in, like even Osborne. This is Osborne's first final, but you wouldn't have a huge amount of doubt about him. So if Foley's going better, play him. And he probably athletically at the stage of his career he's at probably, he allows you to stick with Gibson Park at 9 and not shift him to the wing if you do end up with that injury. So there is an argument for 5-3 as well. No, I think there's an argument for 5-3 because Jimmy O'Brien's back. If they start Larmour and they put O'Brien there, he's
like a back. O'Connor's then if it's 5.
But like a back can still change the game for you.
Yeah. Well, Jimmy O'Brien came into a World Cup quarter final
and he was brilliant,
and he was superb.
So good,
and it's very hard to leave him out of your 23. He started about the last 2 finals. I'd start him. I just think he gives you more than Larmour, and he also is better aerially. Labelle's a real danger man for Toulouse.
Did he take a bit of a knock on the weekend? O'Brien. It looked like to me. I know he finished, but it looked like he took a bit of a knock on his neck. Remember, he was down for a second.
Wasn't one that came up in the aftermath, but I mean,
maybe he's fine. Yeah, maybe he just took a bit of a whatever.
But Brian Deeney did, and Natai. Natai did, and there's one other one as well. So that they had a couple of injuries. Like Natai is another one who, if he was fit, they might look at because he's so experienced. He's such a good player, but I doubt he's going to make it. Sorry, it's Tommy O'Brien, who I really rate.
Like him.
But he did his hamstring again.
He gets injured a lot though.
Yeah, it was a hammy. No, it wasn't a pull. Sorry, it was I think it was a strain rather than a rupture or anything like that. But he's I really think if he got a clean run at it, he's Ireland potential. Like he's really, really good. He is,
quick to me.
Probably one of the fast players in the squad, I would say.
Yeah.
We'll circle back to the final at the end of the show, but just to touch on the Ulster-Leinster game, you were in Kingspan, Ulster sealing their playoff spot, not their Champions Cup spot just yet, but although that's looking quite likely as well. What a fill-up for the Richie Murphy era. Like, it was such a big game. Like, it was physical, abrasive a performance as we've seen from them in a long, long time. The crowd were into it. Thought they were the deserved winners over the course of 80 minutes, albeit Leinster looked to have the game almost iced when Harry Byrne threw that intercept. But what were your takeaways from an Ulster perspective?
Like, I think it was a moment that they needed as an organisation. The fact that they sold out the stadium, that it was Richie's first game as the confirmed head coach, and they have a pretty good record against Leinster the last couple of years. It's not unusual for them to beat Leinster, especially an under-strength Leinster team. And they can't get too carried away because Leinster were missing a lot of their best players. But the way they won it will please them. Coming from behind, having probably butchered a series of first half. They started really well. Leinster weren't really at the races and they didn't punish them, and that's something they'll need to work on if they want to do something in the playoffs. But there's still a team there. The difficult part for them is Addison was one of their best players. He's gone at the end of the season. So a little bit like Munster, there's signs of life, and Munster are showing far more signs of life than Ulster are right now. But so many of the players won't be there next season, which is unfortunate. But in the short term, it gets them what they need out of the season in terms of qualifying for playoffs, probably Champions Cup, barring a bad result or two, and then they have a shot at some playoffs, and they've got a bit of momentum now. So it was a big win for them. Cooney held his nerve brilliantly, as he always does. But I probably was more focusing on Leinster because it was a week out from the final, and the way they managed the second half in the end game would concern me deeply.
3 points.
I was we spoke to Leo Cullen. I asked Leo Cullen and James Ryan about it, and James Ryan's line was we're an ambitious team. We felt like we back our drill, and
this is the captain who kicked 3 points in the Stade de France to go from 3 points to 6 points, and now he's gone completely the other way now. And you remember that game when and that was a huge call at the time that I could be costing them the game, and then was cutting a 6-point lead to a 3-point deficit when it made no sense really in the game flow. Sorry to cut across it, but it's just funny that he's in a complete flip when it's taking that out of Cooney's range was vital, I thought, in the end game. Obviously Nostradamus, he kicked a good penalty, but his range...
Ulster hadn't gone near the Leinster line for the entire second half. So the idea that Ulster were suddenly going to carve Leinster open and go the distance, my instinct at watching it at the time was take the 3, and they didn't. And you would wonder about those decisions this Saturday with all of the things we've talked about, all the mental baggage. If it comes down to it, are they... is Ryan a good decision? Is he able to kind of that skill of being able to
feel the game? Can
you smell the game? Can you? But also, can you just bring yourself back to zero and make a cool, calm decision? That's another. Again, it's a bit like Ross Byrne. It's once we've seen them do it, then it'll be fine. But until we actually see them get it over the line, there was a frazzledness to that that would worry me a little bit, and just that they go through long periods of second halves without scoring, Leinster, and it's a bit of a trend. Keane has done a graphic on it a couple of weeks ago, and there are a lot of big games where they don't score for long periods, and this wasn't a big game in the context of Leinster's season, but it was still an Interpro, and it's just going to cost them home advantage in the URC knockouts. So, but. From an Ulster point of view, it was a good day, and I think they needed it. They just really the roar.
It's rocking. No, it's good to see. They need. It was great to see Richie kind of happy. It's a big decision to go with him, I think, just because he obviously hasn't got the senior team experience. But nice to get off on a positive footing, and hopefully they can go deep. I think in the playoffs, I think it'd be really great for them going into next season, because it impacts everything else. Even though, aside from the kind of financials of getting a Champions Cup, all that kind of stuff, which I think would be positive for them, helps you attract better players in. Once you hopefully they kind of stabilise the ship financially. Then you can kind of say, well, look, there's a product here. You can go play big games of rugby here in a stadium that's packed out, that is, rocking when you play well, and people want you to do well, and also put you in the shop window for the Irish team. So I was really pleased for them, it was great to see it. It was great to see the Kingspan rocking like it is. It's always been a tough place to go and play rugby. Always a vociferous crowd. They love their team up there. It is a great stadium, So I think I was really pleased for them. Good to see Stockdale getting over for a try. He looked happy at the end of the game. That's good. He's for all his failings, and he does have some in his game, he's still a very, very dangerous player out there. He's still a big guy, it was good, he got up for a few good high balls, things like that. I was happy to see him play well. I think he needed that. And I thought I thought they kind of butchered at the start of the game. A few crazy decisions, like, you know, for Cooney, for your scrum half to not be throwing a pass to someone there, you know, that was pretty poor. So great to see him being able to rectify that mistake. And he missed the tackle on Keenan as well. That was a bad one because he's actually usually a great tackler. So that was good to see as well, because he's a big player for them up there. You can hear the crowd even chanting his name before the kick. Like that was good to see. I feel like I'm repeating myself, but I was pleased for them, and I genuinely was pleased for them because it's been a tough while for them, you know.
It's also just a great game. As this is a spectacle, I just really enjoyed it. You could feel the atmosphere. I'm sure you got it firsthand. It was good. Just like physicality, I thought was brilliant. I just thought it was like, you know, changes and scores, comes down to a last minute penalty, some great bits of skill like the Hugo Keenan pass. Just thought it was a great weekend of rugby generally. Friday night Edinburgh Munster I thought was brilliant as well.
Brilliant game.
Very entertaining. It was just kind of one of those mad games. I feel like Munster just somehow
sloppy by Edinburgh. I thought that was a real sloppy pen to give away at the end. You could clearly see he was in the side there, you know. I thought that was poor, you know, because he actually was in an okay position when he was holding the poacher. I thought that was okay, but when he went for himself, I was saying you could clear, like, poor way for them to lose it at home. I know the crowd were upset about it, but like, they were booing, and you don't always expect like to get those ones against you, but it was a clear pen. So good to see Crowley knocking it over. Didn't seem fussed. He's streets ahead of everyone else.
And the league is really like not opened up because there's still some tough tests to come. But like Thomond Park all the way to the final. You're presuming they beat Ulster in the last game. Obviously, maybe they won't. But if they do, like, it's really looking likely that they'll at least have a good crack at maybe getting to a final and then defending their trophy.
Yeah, well, they could get Leinster in the semi the way things are working out. So that might be a bit of a sticky one. But you know, I think the way they're playing, was it eight URC wins in a row?
Nice tries, Coombs. The little back pass from Coombs was absolutely class.
So confident. You can see the confidence. You can see, you know, even just the way that they put Coombs on the bench in a couple of recent games. They put Snyman on the bench this week. They're using their 23, like they're kind of rotating within their 23. There's a beauty, like they'd obviously rather be playing in Spurs this weekend, but there is a beauty for fighting on one front and going 2 weeks on, 1 week off, and just being able to play the same 23 over and over again. You know, Hodnett drops out, Candellin comes in. Candellins playing really well. Jack O'Donoghue's playing in the form of his life. Like, I think they're going to get a few more bodies on the Ireland tour this year on the basis of what they're doing at the moment. And like they should be really backing themselves to go and retain their trophy. Like this is the Munster team. I think we all tipped Munster as outsiders to win Europe this year. This is kind of what the Munster team that we expected to see across the season. And like, Casey's playing well, Crowley's playing well.
They're arguably the form team in Europe.
But I think the rest roads will be really helpful for them.
Oh yeah.
I really think this week is actually important for them to be off because they've actually had to play everyone. And the good thing for them is they've actually kept some people fit. So these guys will be really raw. I think they come into the playoffs in a really, really strong position. They'll be super fit. Like, that was a real battle for the pack there. And like, even the backs, even the defensive parts, you know, they had to dig in. Like, even trying to stop Edinburgh running that one out from behind their own line.
I thought Tuan van der Merwe was going to get that and just go to the head, take it the other end.
But you know what I mean? So that's what I keep saying about like playing these matches at the end of the season when a team are absolutely desperate against it. The fitness you have to have. You have to always be concentrating for the 80 minutes. You know, because teams start doing those things because they need to do it. You know, so there's a lot of value to be had there. Like, I think the week off here, because Byrne looked a little tired to me. I think, a rest for him, he will be, because he's such a big player for them, he'll be raring to go in 2 weeks' time. So I think they're really primed to have a real go at whoever they play in that semi-final.
The one benefit to getting knocked out in the last 16 was they got a week off before going to South Africa, then they got another week off for the semi-finals, and then they got another week off now, and then they can really attack it. So I think they're well primed. One moment I really did enjoy was when Snyman came off the bench, made like a 30-metre break, and then threw like the worst pass of all time. Literally just flung it blindly. He's more of an offloader and a passer.
That was a slightly
Definitely not the best player in the world.
Yeah, exactly. One, I suppose, downbeat bit of news from Munster. Simon Zebo announced his retirement this afternoon. Obviously, we discussed it last week about his future. It looked like after Graham Roundtree's comments that he probably wasn't going to be staying at Munster. We thought he might go elsewhere, but he decided to end his career at the end of this season. It's sad to see. Like, obviously, we still think he has a bit left in the tank, but he's had, But how would you sum up what he's brought to Irish rugby?
I think he's a great personality. He was always great to be in camp with. Had a lot of time for him because we would have competed, for position for a period of time at least. Anyway, but lovely guy, great fun, brilliant player, like massively skillful guy. Probably wasn't mentioned as much about him because he got lots of tries and had a great nose himself. And Earls, he always had a great nose for a try. Seemed to be in the right position at the right time. I probably never appreciated that myself as a player. I always thought, that's a run in from too. Like, it doesn't matter. But you have to be there to get those tries. And the longer I go on, the more I realise that's a real skill to have. But I always thought what I loved about Zebo was great in the air. His basics were good. He wasn't a big tackler, but he was always in the right position defensively, rarely made mistakes there. But the ball handling ability is something that we probably don't mention enough. Like, a really, really skillful player, had a great feel for the game. Great nose for spotting an opportunity, and good talk around the pitch as well. He's great relationship with Conor Murray, with Casey too, obviously with Crowley as well. We saw some of that in Toulon this year. So I think he's a loss to the game. You see what he brings to Thomond Park as well. They'll miss him on a number of fronts, I think, next year. I was surprised that they haven't found a way to kind of lure him out, but maybe his body's kind of given up a little bit, So sad to see him go. As I said, I think there's more rugby in him. He's one of their best players this year, I think. One of their only kind of game breakers. I think in that back three, and sad to see him go.
Yeah, like the sliding doors moment. He last played for Ireland in Japan in 2017. Like, so you're coming back a long, long time. Like, if he doesn't take that move to Racing, by doing that, like, Joe Schmidt immediately cut him loose, so he didn't even get to play in the Grand Slam campaign in 2018 when he was still playing for Munster. Like, it's just an interesting what if had he stayed in Ireland, what his career might have looked like internationally anyway.
He was starting, the starting winger at that point. He started in Chicago against the All Blacks. He had won Joe over to some degree. I don't know if Joe was. He was never Joe's favourite player, I think it's safe to say, but I think Joe recognised
the skills,
the quality and ability that he had, and his attitude was very good in that period. And I remember he got Joe didn't pick him initially, and in 2014 he brought him to Argentina. I don't think you were on that tour to Argentina in 2014. No. And he played him in the first game, and the whole thing was like, can Zebo win Joe over? And like, does he have to be, does he have to become a serious and fit the type? And he comes onto the pitch and he's like waving at the crowd and he's doing his stuff. And then he gets the ball, his first touch in an Ireland jersey under Joe Schmidt. He takes contact and just flings this wild out the back offload. And he was just like, this is me. Pick me or don't pick me, but I'm not gonna compromise myself to be. I think he improved under Joe eventually, and they kind of probably found a way. But I think the fact that he went to Racing, and look, he said he always wanted to play in France, and you have to believe that. I'm sure it was a good financial deal and everything, but also I'd say just he got sick of being a
character. I think the camp was the killer for him. Yeah. The camp was always the killer for Zebo, I think, is that it was so kind of serious, that, and I think, Simon was always a guy who I think he really thrived when the game was kind of broken down. So spending all that time trying to figure out how to break teams down. And I think it was probably to Ireland's detriment too, where they spent so much time on set piece trying to figure out how can we move this guy here, who needs to be in that ruck there, where really someone like Zebo, where his real strength is that he opens up the pitch for you all the way through the game, and that he's, for a guy who doesn't, I wouldn't say, look, I hope he doesn't mind me saying, but he wasn't a hard trainer, He loved playing the games and the fitness games, all that. He was good at all those things because he was a great runner. But all those things wouldn't have helped him with Joe, and I don't think he liked being stuck in camp with him all the time. I'd say he liked to go home, relax, and one of those guys who I think camp really didn't suit under Joe, whereas he's a guy you had to manage, and I think a really skillful manager would have got the best out of Zebo, because I think Ireland probably...
Maybe say if Zebo was playing like then at this time now.
And he was a bit of a hard nut as well, though. But I think Zebo could have won him over, because Zebo
he certainly would have allowed him to be himself more, he
would have enjoyed camp a bit more, I think. Yeah, possibly.
But I mean, Farrell, he came back, and Farrell never picked him after he came back, and
I think some of the stuff he said in the meet, didn't he have a few kind of quips here and there? I think.
He became a pundit very early in it, far before he retired. I do like the fact that he's going. Like, I'd rather he sign on. He makes life more interesting, but he's playing some great stuff. He missed out last year. He wasn't picked for the kind of the run in. He was carrying a lot of injuries. He got to a European final with Racing, scored 2 tries in the final. Played really well in the final, but lost. I don't know if he has a senior, apart from he won a Six Nations, if not 2. But I think a senior medal with Munster, playing the way he's playing, is such an important part. It'd be a lovely way for him to sign off. He's playing such good rugby. It's nice that he's able to do it on his own terms, even though there's a player there. And I keep going back, South Africa won the World Cup with a 36-year-old, 37-year-old fullback last year. There could potentially be, especially because he's such a great second distributor. Look, he's not as good as Hugo Keenan. I think he'd admit that himself, but there is.
He definitely won't.
It's the one thing out of all you said there that I really doubt. But no, I think he's. I think he is a great player. There's no doubt about that. He is a really good player in my mind, and I feel like we probably missed a little bit of him at international level. I think
2019 World Cup, Ireland were crying out for Simon Zebo, I would have thought, at fullback.
Completely agree. But he's a great kicking game too, and great under the high ball. So he had everything that Joe kind of would have liked, but I just think the personalities probably clashed a little bit. So that's what we probably
2015, like Rob Kearney was so secure, but Zebo would have given Ireland that second distributor, that second pair of eyes. Joe never really went with that. He more saw him as a winger, but I love him at fullback. I think he gives you so much in terms of that second, like, and his relationship with Murray. They're so telepathic in what they do, and he seems to be developing.
Even against Connacht, like they linked up again.
Yeah,
for the last,
absolutely. And that's great that he's rolling in the years at the moment and doing it, because I think he'll get back in. I know Hades played it on Friday, but I think he'll get it. Yeah, he adds so much to what they do.
Yeah. I want to talk about Sam Prendergast as well. You had a story today on the back page of the Indo that Leinster and Connacht might be coming to, or maybe not a loan agreement. I don't know who's going to be from Leinster will be agreeing if it comes to pass, but that Sam Prendergast might be going to Connacht next season for a season-long loan. How likely do you think that is, and do you think it's a good idea?
I think it's a good idea if he wants to do it. Like, it has to be on his terms, and he has to be confident. I think the fact that his brother's there probably helps him make that decision if that's the way he wants to go. Because just even a season playing with him would be probably a cool thing that he could do. He'll definitely get more game time. He's guaranteed more game time there. Like, there's an argument that he could play a lot next year at Leinster. You know, he's gone from 2 games last year to something like 14 or 15 this year, mostly off the bench. So Leinster have a plan for all these guys. So I'm sure the plan is for him to increase that next year as long as he deserves it. And Leo is good at kind of negotiating the path for a lot of these players. But Connacht have a problem. Like, JJ Hanrahan's done his cruciate. They only have Jack Carty, and everyone else is kind of a centre come 10, whereas you've got like one of the best young 10s in the world sitting there, not getting games at Leinster. It's only for a year. Leinster are resistant to it because they think he's better off playing with all the players that he's playing, getting the coaching facilities, working with Ian Arbery, working with Jordy Barrett, all that sort of stuff. I think he needs to be selfish and go, I want to play, and go and go play Challenge Cup rugby, go play in a team that's struggling sometimes, go play in crap conditions in Galway in the Dexcom Stadium, with 3 sides. And
is there an argument for Ulster? I don't like.
There is, but
Ulster
I say
Ulster seems like a way more logical route to go.
I think Leinster would object far more to Ulster because they see them more as a threat. Maybe that's a stretch, but I think they see them more as a rival. Whereas
like
Connacht,
Irish rugby, like Carty's there, like. God, I find
there is an Irish. I'm sure Ulster.
No one is Neil is it Dokie? Is it Neil Doak?
No, I think there's a second.
Sorry,
I think there's still an extra.
Real desperate.
Show my age
really
there.
Desperate if they're calling on Neil Doak.
Show my age.
Nathan Doak's gone back to playing 9 again towards the end of the season, so. I think they're going to sign someone. I think they'll
obviously have someone.
But look, if Prendergast is available on loan, then I'm sure Bryn Cunningham and Richie Murphy will make the inquiry. And the same, Pete Wilkins is a highly rated coach. Mark Sexton, he's worked with as an attack coach.
10.
But no, I know, yeah. But Mark Sexton was his attack coach at 20s. You could make the same argument with Richie Murphy. 10
I agree
was
with
his coach at the 20s.
Way.
I just can't see old Leinster allowing that to happen.
But
But they don't. Why is it even their decision?
Well, he's their player. I know it is. I think it has to be.
A few players.
Yeah, and the RFU just have signed off on Leinster signing RG Snyman and Jordy Barrett, so there's a bit of that's a negotiation. Yeah. So
it would have been, surely it'd be hard for Sam Prendergast if Leo Cullen's like, I want you to stay, for him to be like, no, I'm going to leave for a year. Like, you're not kind of like then alienating your actual.
Big enough to do that.
No, I know, but you're kind of pissing off your actual coaches, ultimately, rather than you're going for a year. Like, if they're like, we really want you to stay, you'll play a lot of rugby next year, and you're like, no, I want to go to Connacht and play with my brother for a year. They'd be like, okay.
No, I'd rather play. Realistically, he's sitting behind the 2 Byrne brothers, definitely, and probably Frawley.
certainly that's the way to
Depends what happens on Saturday.
Yeah.
I'd make my decision after Saturday. If Toulouse beat Leinster and Ross Byrne doesn't play well, I would probably stay. If Ross Byrne plays great and Leinster win, maybe I go for a year.
Paul Cost is starting for Toulouse on Saturday. We assume Nicolas Deporter has played Six Nations rugby for France. So is Pasolo Tuolagi. They all played against Sam Prendergast in a World Cup final this year. He's looking at those guys going, well, hang on a second. Why am I being held back and playing
looks like not
URC?
Fred, though.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair, but but he doesn't think that. In his own mind, he's got to be going, I got to be playing week on week, because if he plays for Connacht week on week, he can get a cap in November. He can go on the emerging Ireland tour that's going to be South Africa in September. Then he can play against Fiji in November. I think it's Fiji, and then he can be involved in the Six Nations. Then there's a summer tour. Whereas if he's at Leinster, maybe he gets all those opportunities. Maybe Andy Farrell rates him that highly, but if he's not playing in Champions Cup rugby, or if he's not playing in the Interpros, if he's only playing 1 week on and 1 week, 3 weeks off, and being drip fed, and Ross and Harry are ahead of him, it's harder to justify.
He gets to play with Matt Hansen back next year. Hopefully, obviously he's had a few issues with that shoulder coming back, has slowed him down a bit, but. Yeah, I don't know. It's tricky.
It's a hard decision for him.
And the point you make there about the French players, like Ireland is probably the only country in the world where if you go and like light up an under-20s World Cup, you have like no prospect of still playing senior rugby really in a meaningful way the following year.
Yeah,
because obviously England has 12 clubs or 10 clubs now. France has 14, and like obviously for Paul Costa, it's not as if he's competing against like Gary Ringrose and Robbie Henshaw at Toulouse like he would be if he was a Leinster player. So it's
only 4 places to go.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like if Paul Costa was playing for Leinster, he wouldn't be starting this.
I think the throughput from last year's 20s is probably higher than most other teams, but that's still not high. McNabney's got a bit of action for Ulster. Brian Gleeson's been fairly heavily involved for Munster until he got injured, and he's back now. And Prendergast has played 14 or 15 times, but it has been very strategic and bit part. And he played in European Cup because Ross Byrne was injured, and Harry got injured as well. But he clearly he knows how good he can be, and I'm sure he's impatient to play and he wants to play, and
he's right to do that. The thing for him, like if I'm being honest, looking at him, he needs to put on some weight. Absolutely. He really needs to do that quickly because he'll get himself hurt. That's the counter argument to playing games, is that you're just not built ready. You're not ready for it yet. He's got a decent frame, I think. Looks a little like Sexton actually, I think, doesn't he? Yeah. But he needs to, Sexton was actually quite a big guy. Like he was very strong in the gym and all that stuff. So he needs to get on that really sharp. He needs to have a massive summer. That's really essential for his growth, because he needs to get a little bit of muscle and strength in the bones, just something on the frame to help him if he's going to be playing next year. But if he does that, it's definitely the right thing to move, I think, even if Ross Byrne doesn't have a big one. I swear, because Ross Byrne is very established there. So is Harry. So is Kieran. They're close enough to. They're paying them decent money. Sam has to have, he has to shoot the lights out in training every single day, and the other guys have to have. There's 3 of them have to play badly for a long period of time for you to get a game. He needs to show on another providence, and he needs to come back with that in his pocket and say, look, I did that in a place that's not as good as here. Put me with that Irish pack, and I'll really shoot the lights out for you. So I think that's where he puts the pressure on. It won't be in training.
Or now that he has an option to go, they kind of have to go, well, you're going to play more next season because we rate.
Well, once he signs up, though, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. Well, this could be their argument back to him. Goes, look, you're playing 20 games next season, you're starting, you're going to jump ahead of him. That's he's in a very strong position, but I think when David Humphreys looks at this, or News 4, whoever's making the decision, I presume Humphreys is getting more and more influential as he goes, and the fact that we have a former international 10 in charge of these decisions,
you'll see the value
approach. I think he will, and he might see the value of sending him to Ulster as well.
I agree, yeah, but we'll be interested to see how this shakes out over the next week or so, or 2 weeks before we get a final decision. Just before we finish up, lads, moment of the week in association with Bank of Ireland. My one was the Jacob Stockwell intercept. You mentioned earlier it's good to see him kind of enjoying his rugby. It was a huge moment in the game and their season. Leinster, I think, were 8 up at that stage and about to get a bonus point try. If they score there, it's probably game over. He takes it 80 metres the other way. All of a sudden, it's a 1 point game. Completely changed. To be fair, he's always been half decent about sniffing at an intercept. I know you didn't think it was.
He's actually in okay position for this one. I thought my worry is that when he ends up in that one, he can drift into a bad position and leaves himself very exposed. But that one, I thought he was actually okay. He wasn't as bad as he normally is. Yeah, but I'd still like to see him coming from wider on them. But yeah, being very picky.
Killed his moment.
Sorry, it was great to see him go the full length, even though the parachute came out. It was good to see.
I'm going to keep it simple and go for Cooney's kick, because it was one of those moments where you kind of had my report pretty much written but couldn't write the intro until it was done, and I just sat back and watched it and just listened to the noise that greeted it going over, and to hear Belfast rocking like that, which it hasn't done for quite some time. It was a really cool sporting moment, and in a competition that I've maligned over the years but I think is really delivering this year. It really meant a lot to Cooney, to the Ulster team, to their fans, and it was a really cool moment to be there for.
Did you have to do much rewriting then?
No, I'd kind of hedged my bets. I'd left the kind of the first 6-7 parts free enough, so it wasn't too bad. But it was impressive. It was impressive in terms of the way he delivered it. You never really had any doubt once he stepped up.
Kicker.
Oh yeah. He looked confident over it.
Yeah, but it was cool.
And just on the URC point, I completely agree. And you know what? I wish they could schedule it like this every year. I know it's because of the World Cup that it's not like last year, semi-final URC, final of the Champions Cup, final of the URC. Now this time the playoffs get proper time to breathe. Like we have a week of regular season and then 3 weekends in a row of big knockout games. Like you could have Leinster going to Loftus Versfeld potentially, depending on how things shake out. Munster and Thomond Park. It's just if they could keep the schedule exactly like this,
it works.
That works way better.
It works,
and it creates
so
that bit
better.
of interest.
Exactly,
You're watching it week to week.
Exactly, and you're
engaged.
Like,
I think.
are you really as invested in the playoff race when it's in the midst of the semi-finals of the Champions Cup? No, not to the same degree.
You're either going, oh, like Leinster have lost, or yeah, like Leinster have won, but in the middle of the week you're going, okay, like I'm kind of, is rugby done? Like, have I, you're not going to. Whereas like, now you're going to get to build it up each week.
I know, like Leo Cullen obviously selecting the team the way he did was a bad mistake, but from a league perspective, they should have looked at that and saying, even for him to be thinking like that, our schedule cannot be right if a coach is even contemplating that.
Definitely agree.
Whereas now, I think bringing it that little bit forward, now it was because the World Cup had started. I think they have to change the schedule a little bit, but I think this works for all.
That's a great. I'm glad you made that point. Actually,
your moment.
Sorry, I ruined your moment, by the way.
No, it's
you did bring me in on it, so I had to comment. But I do think there was a couple. I'll try and be as quick as I can. I wanted to mention the Coombs back pass it did. That was class. Crowley getting the kick, dead. Like the nerves, like really growing as a player. I just missed out. I know we're all going for the same game. I was reticent of that, but I just think the Keenan pass back inside was just a bit of magic. I can't wait to see him next week. I'm so glad he's back because I just think he's one of the best players in the world, probably the best 15 for me in the world. So how he spotted him, just because he must have just known that either probably from playing with Gibson Park, but my moment of the week was definitely Keenan. How he got through, he was nearly falling over, gathered himself, throws the perfect pass inside to Cormac. It was just magic moment, I thought. So yeah, that was mine.
He was sensational.
Oh, so good for the game.
Looks,
Saved him so many
so
times.
sharp. Yeah, so he'll definitely start. Time for predictions then. I'm going with Leinster. I think there's a few reasons. One, I just think they have a better bench. We touched on it earlier. I think they have more to come off the bench in the second half. I'd be very interested, as I said, to see the selection. I think if they go with Van der Fleer, I think they can make a good start like they have in the other semi-finals. And if they do that, I think they have a good enough bench then to see it out. One thing, and we both touched on it earlier, or we all did, is the DuPont factor. Like how quiet, to a degree, Leinster and Ireland have kept him. Like I was saying to you, like you watch some Toulouse games, some of the tries he creates out of absolutely nothing. If he scores a try outside of how the game is generally flowing, that could really decide things. But I think if Leinster are able to keep him reasonably quiet, I think they'll win the game. What do you think?
I really don't know. I've been veering between the two of them all week, and I think the Leinster versus Toulouse record and the Ireland versus France recent record definitely has to be a factor in it. At the same time, I think Toulouse have the capacity to score more points. I think I'm not sure the Nienaber defence is bedded in well enough that they can shut down Toulouse enough. If they're only going to score 19, 20, 21 points, they need to score heavily, and I don't know if their attack is there. So I'm probably edging towards Toulouse, but if you ask me in 10 minutes, I could be edging towards Leinster. I think it's really tight. I don't think it might not necessarily be a tight game in terms of the scoreline. One team could pull away, and Leinster could do another 41-10 or 41-15, but I don't see it happening. I just think the final factor is there as well. Yeah, I'm edging towards, who did I say? Toulouse. I should stick with that. I think Toulouse, but I'm not with any great conviction.
Yeah, no, we got that. but actually, completely agree. I'm the same. We've been hopping back and forth on it as well. Yeah, I just what I think when I'm tipping, I think Leinster's packed to step up. I think that's the key factor for them. I think the bench might play a key role, and so agree on that one. I think they might edge it in the discipline factor, the discipline stakes, but I'm worried about Ramos's kicking. So they're all the things. There's so much whirling around the head. I think I like Toulouse possibly at set piece. That's always nice in a big game. You know, there's nowhere you can run in a scrum. You know, that kind of way, and there's not much thinking. Well, there is thinking to do, but it's the weight in the pack. You know, you worry about that. I think a little bit too, but I think Leinster get it right defensively. I think their pack realise that they have to be direct and take them on. That's when Leinster's attack really flows, and they've got Keenan back and Ryan back. I'm going Leinster. I think they get the job done. Nervy, but I think they get it done in a tight one. And I think they manage DuPont as best you can to maybe one or two big moments, but nothing too major. So that's my prediction. Leinster by 3 or 4 points maybe.
So we're all very, I think, ready.
I didn't like doing that. No one enjoyed that except you. You seem pretty certain, but
I was certain the last 2 years as well, and the year before that, and the year before that, and the year before that. Every year since 2018, I thought they'd win it. Like, so I've been wrong every year. So maybe this year.
I actually cannot wait for the game. I can't.
It is
the most excited I've been for a game. Well, sorry, I probably say this every year, but it's probably the most excited.
You do say this every year.
No, it's the most excited because I just think both teams. I just love everything about Toulouse.
Yeah.
When we used to play them, they were so good when I started, and I just can't, it's great to see them like Leinster Toulouse in a final.
First time ever. Like the fact that it's the first time they've ever played in the final, considering the most
feels right. Feels like two top dogs. Yeah, so feeling good about it.
Well, it's set up to be an absolutely mouth-watering game this Saturday. I'd like to thank Rudd and Luke for joining me on this week's episode of the Left Wing Podcast. We'll be back later in the week with another show reflecting on the team news. In the meantime, you can subscribe to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or listen on the Irish Independent website. So until next time, thanks for listening and goodbye.